Go. Okay, you're up.
Okay, so this is Dr. Steve Auerbach, who's involved with healthcare for the 99% group out of Occupy Wall Street. He just did a talk over at UNC between 4 and 5 or so p.m. So we had great turnout. We had about 20 people there. And now we want to take the show on the road and open it up to folks out at the Occupy site. And thanks to Becca for streaming this so that people who aren't here can make it, and so that we can also have a little bit of archiving of what's going on. So my name is Katya. I helped organize this, and so Steve's going to give us a bit of a background, and then we'd like to open it up to folks who are here to sort of share and tell their stories about and ask questions.
So, hi, yes, my name is Dr. Steve. I'm with Physicians for a National Health Program. I'm from New York City. I'm a pediatrician in New York City. I should mention my wife's family doc. We consider this family values. We have 2 children. And I am part of the Healthcare for the 99% working group with the Occupy Wall Street that was in Zuccotti Park and is still in Zuccotti Park and throughout New York City. So, how does this fit in? Well, people are always asking, what is Occupy about? So I can only tell you what I think it's about. Occupy is egalitarian. We have no leaders. We just have the 99%. So
can everybody hear him okay? I think we are a small enough group that I don't think people's mic is necessary. But
I'm happy to. Again, I'm used to people's mic from New York. Yeah.
I know. Everybody from Occupy Wall Street comes in and says, why don't we use people's mics? Well, when you have 20 people, you might not need it.
Sure. And you got less traffic noise than we do at Zuccotti. No problem. So, what I think it's about? Well, it's about inequality and just the massive increase that we've had in inequality in the United States in the mid-1970s. I think the key message is that it is really, really bad. It's much worse than people realize. It wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be like this. And change is within our power. We are the 99%. So, series of deliberate policies pushed through by the ultra-rich for the ultra-rich has resulted in increasing income inequality, increasing wealth inequality, low wages, lack of rights for workers, lower taxes for the wealthy, higher taxes for the middle class, unemployment, wage stagnation, corporate control of our political system, and just frankly corporate greed. It doesn't have to be like this. It wasn't always as bad as this, and it will change back to the way it was and better. So how does single payer fit into this? Well, single payer is a fancy word for Medicare for all, expanded and improved Medicare for all. We already have a form of universal health insurance paid for by our taxes that guarantees you at least some access to care. It's called Medicare. And guess what? Every other developed country in the world, every other developed capitalist country in the world has universal health care coverage through one system or another similar to single payer. What it means is everybody pays in through hopefully more progressive taxes, just as we do for our military security, our homeland security, our social security, our roads. We pay into the same for the health financing of health insurance. The delivery of care, the doctors, the clinics, the hospitals, they're all independent, they all remain private, competing with each other for your services. The one thing is they all take your insurance down. You walk up, there's no co-pays, there's no deductibles. And the funny thing is, it's not just moral sense, it makes perfect business sense too. It's been studied for 25 years, multiple independent studies, GAO, CBO, Lewin Group, all the Beltway bandits have analyzed it, and guess what? This is the only way to achieve comprehensive, high-quality coverage for all that also controls total cost. It saves the state's money, it saves businesses' money, and it saves families and individuals' money. The only folks who get hurt on this are the for-profit health insurance companies. Everyone else benefits. So I want to open this up for a moment with a story that is one individual story, but it also happens to thousands and thousands of people all over the country. Right now, the main way folks get their private for-profit health insurance, or for-profit companies, not for them, obviously, is through their jobs. They get their employment, hopefully, in this day and age, we hope for folks being able to be employed. We hope that their employer is a good enough employer. They hope that their employer is a good enough employer that they still provide some form of group health insurance through the actual employee. The person still has to pay a premium out of their pocket with co-pays and deductibles, but at least they have access to some form of a group health insurance through the workplace. We hope. But what happens if somebody has a pre-existing condition? What happens if somebody in their family has a pre-existing condition, has asthma, has diabetes? These are common things. Maybe somebody had cancer in the past. What happens when they try to get a job? So this happens to be one story, but frankly, it's thousands of stories all across America.
I was hired in August. Durham Center for Senior Life, social worker, and my employer was very happy with me, very, very happy. Never complained, never said anything bad, never said like, oh, you're not doing your job right. So I was doing my job right. The agency nonprofit, working with the seniors, mostly with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I love my job. I love the people I work with, I love clients, I love staff. And after 2 months of being employed, I was eligible for health insurance. The health insurance from the agency. The agency told me a lot of good things, that we have a great insurance plan, we have a wonderful insurance plan, you will be happy with us, please stay with us, we hope you will stay with us for years from now. And that's what I believe. And after 2 months, I applied for insurance, I filled all the paperwork, and the part of the paperwork was, do you want to include your family members? So to cover my children together with me, monthly premium was $410. To include my husband would be $800. So I choose smaller one. I choose $400 a month versus $800 a month. So my husband left uninsured, but I was hoping my kids would be insured. And I applied, and I put everything about their health condition. And my child has an existing condition, which is very well managed. He's not under any medication. He's not going to the doctors every time. I mean, he's a healthy child, except that pre-existing condition. And when I applied it, and when they, first of all, when they saw it, they asked me that when it happened, why it happened, when did you go to the doctors, how well it's managed, was he on the insurance before? And he wasn't, because I was on the probation period, so there was no insurance for that time. And while I was looking for a job, he didn't have insurance for several months too. So then everything starting going downfall, and I've been questioned every time, almost on everyday basis by insurance company about his existing conditions, about his general health, how often we go to the doctor, when the child got sick, do we have any other health conditions, and it's been going on and on and on. Even though I was supposed to be under the health plan, I was not. For the whole month, I was not under the health plan. And we couldn't get to any doctor's appointment because I didn't have insurance. So after 3 weeks of battle, they decided to raise the whole insurance for the whole agency, because they had cut for a number of people having pre-existing conditions in the agency. So when I added with my child, it was more than they could afford. So on Tuesday morning, I was called to the director, and the director said, sorry, your probation period is ending in 4 days, so we cannot afford you. We cannot have you. We don't like you. They fired me. It's my personal story.
Now you have no help.
I have no help.
And no job.
Now my kids have many.
Somebody who wanted to work, was doing everything right,
Wanting to do
gets fired because the health insurance for small pool, small fragmented for-profit pool of this one company, this one insurer. Her one child was going to make the insurance for that pool too expensive. It was going to cost everyone else to raise their premiums so that the CEOs of the insurance companies could keep the profits going. Because it was this tiny fragmented pool, one child made a difference, and so she got fired.
Wow.
If you have, yeah. So now he's on Medicaid. She doesn't have a job.
I don't have insurance.
And this is the system we currently have that we're supposed to be so happy that hey, that's the world we're told. But when it comes to health care and the health insurance and health financing system, it's simply the contrary. And we have the numbers and the data to prove it compared to all the other developed countries. I should say this is a classic. I mean, it's a single specific personal story and a tragedy for this family. And frankly, probably for the employer. I mean, this is a not-for-profit do-goodness organization. I don't think they really wanted to do this, but it meant jacking up the premiums for everyone else. If you have, the point of health insurance is to spread the risk. That's the point of insurance, is to spread the risk. Okay? You can't make a profit insuring sick people. That sounds like a moral statement, but it's actually an economic statement. Sick people are too expensive. So the only way for insurance to work is to have a large pool. And what's the natural largest pool for the United States? It's everyone in the United States. It's the all-American insurance pool. Everybody pays in, and then you don't have problems like this. And, it's also an example of how it's better for employers, right? It frees the employers up to hire the best people, and frankly, if they have to lay somebody off to not have on their conscience, laying somebody off and having them lose their insurance. It maximizes the freedom of private business to build and grow and shift and move. And for employees to not feel like they're tied to a job if there's another opportunity because of their insurance situation. So it frees up the rest of the, if you will, the capitalist for-profit business system. It's good for small business. It's good for big business. It's good for everybody other than the health insurance companies.
Does anybody else have other stories? So we could either do questions or other stories or even a discussion about what we can do.
Does anybody else have a story from their own situation? Please.
I've got one. I'm a small businessman.
Step in.
A lot of you are from around here, you may know, but I have a building company. In 2008, we had 14 employees. Those employees made all kinds of benefits: vacation, holiday pay, not sick leave. We didn't pay sick leave. We didn't pay half of their medical insurance. We had a pool.
You're a small business, 14 employees.
Small business.
Good on you, sir. Good on you.
And we gave profit sharing. When the economy tanked, within 2 years, we laid off everybody but 7 employees because the work wasn't there. How this affects businesses is that everything becomes so much more competitive and cutthroat. And we've been in business for 33 years. We have a sterling reputation in the community. Our work is based on referrals from happy clients. But when we start cutting vacation, holiday pay, tool allowance, things like paying people mileage for running around doing their job in their trucks, we also have to cut back on our medical coverage. So the last thing we wanted to do was to cut medical coverage. So this year, we had 7 employees who are covered. My wife and my policy is $16,000 a year. That's for 2 of us. Oh, now we're older. I'm not going to tell you how old she is, but I'm 64, so I'll be getting Medicare pretty soon. But the problem with this is that our medical insurance is what they call 80% coverage and a $5,000 deductible. So we still, if we have a year and we have a big problem, we have to pay $5,000 for our deductible, $16,000 in premiums with $21 grand. We have to pay co-pays, and then we have to pay 20% of any big medical bill. So what you're looking at is a family of middle-class Americans can be bankrupted simply by getting sick. That's my story, and that's one of the reasons that I am here at OccupyCH.
All right. That's all right.
Wow.
Yeah.
This a small businessman who wants to do the right thing by his employees, running a good business, making a profit, doing good work, employing folks, and insurance is just part of the problem that he's encountering. And again, it's the issue of the small selective pool. It's a matter of that being locked in and frozen and unable to have the flexibility you need as a business person because of the insurance issue, the private insurance going through the employer. It's just a ridiculous situation. And again, it doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Employers don't provide private insurance. There are large pools, one way or the other, large universal pools across the entire country. It just doesn't have to be this way. We're always telling us single-payer folks, that we're pie-in-the-sky dreamers, we're too idealistic, we're not realistic. You know something? We're the only ones who are being realistic. The rest of the system doesn't work. We know that single-payer would work. We're the folks that are being realistic. I made this comparison before to global climate change denial, right? So, inside Wall Street, inside Wall Street and inside Washington, they say this isn't politically realistic, that isn't politically realistic. But the global climate change, temperatures are still going up, the ice caps, the glaciers are still melting. The real world doesn't care what's politically doable in the United States according to the politicians and the 1%. The real world just keeps on going. Whether it's global climate change or the way insurance has to work in terms of a single universal pool, we are the realists. It's the only way that's going to work. Is there anyone else who has a story?
And I also point out, so I'm always all about the what can we do. So Dr. Jonathan here is president of Healthcare for All NC, which is a statewide branch affiliate of physicians for a national health plan. So you can get involved locally with people who are advocating locally with this. So I have these membership forms, if you'd like, and their website should be on here, I hope. Yes. So if you'd like, I can certainly pass this around. If you want to. So you can take. That's one thing we can sort of do locally, and maybe we can have more kind of events, have to see an ongoing conversation, especially. For example, Bert, I hadn't realized that was one of your motivators. Is this? I think that's great. There's probably more people for whom this is a motivator. We can certainly keep this dialogue.
Website is healthcareforallnc.org.
I don't know if you've already talked about it. No, I don't.
Please step in. I'm sorry.
I wanted to just ask a question because I wasn't here at the beginning.
Sure,
so
yes, ma'am.
Have you talked about price control at all? Because I think that's one of the problems that
absolutely.
the insurance is not the only problem. The price
absolutely.
control.
Well, but insurance is part of why the prices are out of control.
No, I know.
So, no, you're absolutely right, ma'am. So, I always say, first of all, that single payer, in other words, that nationwide pool for health insurance, everybody pays in, the government is the single insurer, private delivery, is a necessary but not sufficient fix. It's required as part of the fix, but you're absolutely right. The other factor that's different in the U.S. system compared to all those other developed wealthy countries, is prices. One of the reasons that our healthcare system is so expensive is, the costs are too high. So we pay 2 to 3 times the amount of any other country for drugs. We're not trying to put the drug companies out of business. By the way, it's the same multinational drug companies here, and it's the same as it is in France and Germany and Switzerland and New Zealand and the rest of the developed world. It's the same company, multinational companies, the same drugs. They're paying half to a third the price. In New Zealand, it's actually 1/3 the price. So part of it is the drug cost, and the same thing applies to everything else, the hospital costs, and yes, the doctor's fees. Some of the doctors at the very top end are going to have to be a little less of the 0.1% themselves. But The biggest difference is everything else. The hospital costs, the insurance overhead costs. You know, Medicare is 4% overhead. It's actually about 3%, 3.2% overhead, compared to around 18% overhead for the for-profits. Much more efficient. But across the board, whether it's the MRI scan will cost you $1,600 in the United States. It costs you $500-600 is the fee to get an MRI in other countries. And yes, by the way, they have all the MRIs you need also. By the way, MRI wasn't invented here, it was invented in the UK. So you're absolutely right. Cost is part of the issue. One issue is that when you have a single buyer, it's called monopsony. Fancy word. It's the opposite of monopoly. Monopsony is when the buyer has the monopoly and everyone else, so the buyer is able to bid down the cost. That's the way it works in Canada and New Zealand and Sweden and Germany and France and all those other developed countries that we're competing with. And in the case of Germany and Japan, they're certainly out-competing us, in part because their businesses don't have to have these worries. They're able to bargain the cost down. It's pure capitalism in this sense, right? It's the market efficiency of a single purchaser being able to do large bulk purchasing as well as large bulk planning. So these countries are able to say, we're only going to pay so much. We'll make a decent profit and no more. And again, you know, you can say, oh, this about Canada or that about Germany, but their outcomes are better than ours in many, many ways, more ways than not. And the only real differences are how they cover the insurance situation in terms of a de facto universal pool, and as you were pointing out, absolutely negotiating cost down for the exact same services.
But they also accept that, you know, everybody pays a different amount, which is not accepted here. Right. The insurance costs $400, whether you're poor or rich, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Whereas there you pay a certain percentage of your salary.
Right, you're paying.
So the
right,
poor
so
pay less.
Progressive,
and the rich pay
exactly,
more. Yeah,
exactly. And it's been worked out in the United States. We've done the modeling. So I said again, the econometric modeling has been done, and it's the only way to actually get the comprehensive coverage, quality coverage, and control total cost. And when you work it out in terms of how it works, in terms of you're paying more in taxes, a little bit more in taxes, but you're not paying anything in premiums, you're not paying anything in co-pays and deductibles, and it's, you know, saves money for states in terms of all the money the state has to put in, let's say, for charity care for the public clinic or the public hospital, state or local government. It works out that the cut point for your taxes is everybody who earns roughly more than $150,000 will pay a little bit more, and everybody who pays less than $150,000 will pay less. Okay, so that's how it works out on the progressive taxation. The other way the modeling has been done for those who are sort of tax wonks and want to get into it is if you work it out as a payroll deduction tax, which I'm not in favor of because they're inherently regressive, it works out to replacing all of the current payroll deduction tax that's going to Medicare or Medicaid, and replacing, again, all of those premiums, all of those co-pays, all of those out-of-pocket expenses that you have even if you have insurance, all the state and local costs. It works out to about a 7% for the corporate payroll deduction and about a 4% for the individual payroll deduction, and that covers it.
What is it you favor for funding?
Oh, I much prefer progressive income tax.
So just an income tax instead of a payroll deduction.
So yeah, I mean, you know, if I were writing tax code from scratch, there would be no payroll deduction tax at all. You know, and you'd have a much more progressive income tax that included taxing capital gains and dividends at the same rates and all those kinds of things. That's another story. It's just been modeled different ways in terms of how you would pay for it.
You said something about Cuba,
Sure. Well, you know, you can certainly, you know, go see the Michael Moore movie Sicko and learn all about Cuba. I actually don't like Cuba as a comparison point. Cuba, frankly, is a very problematic place for a lot of reasons. problematic because of the boycott. It's problematic because it is a military dictatorship. It has some social justice issues that it does well, and many others that it does not do well. I don't find Cuba a useful point of comparison to the United States. I find Germany and Sweden and Denmark and France and the United Kingdom and Canada and New Zealand and Australia and Japan and Taiwan. Those are the countries, I think, that are sort of comparable, if you will. And in all of these cases, they have a social safety net, a social insurance system that is good, that means that nobody goes bankrupt due to medical costs. Before the Great Recession, in 2007, the data was that of all personal bankruptcies, a little over 60% were due to medical expenses, and 75% of those were people who had health insurance when they got sick. They still went they still went bankrupt. The majority of personal bankruptcies just prior to the Great Recession due to medical costs does not happen, not imaginable in any other developed country other than the United States. So, again, we are the outlier nation in all the wrong ways.
Can you get that quote again? 75% of personal bankruptcy?
No, in 2007, just prior to the Great Recession, I acknowledge that with the Great Recession, other things have kicked in as well. But for all the years prior, I mean, it was studied serially, so it was studied in 2000, and they repeated in 2005. A little over 60% of personal bankruptcies were due to medical expenses. And of those, 75% had health insurance at the time they got sick, but they went bankrupt anyway. The problem, of course, is when you get sick, what happens? Well, first of all, you're likely to lose your job, which then means after the fact you lose your insurance. Put that aside for a moment. If you get sick, what happens? Well, first of all, you have your deductible. So you have to pay that $5,000 or whatever it is out of pocket before the insurance even begins to cover you. Then let's say it's an 80-20 plan, which is very typical. That still means you're paying 20% out of pocket. Well, if you have cancer or some severe long-term chronic disease, that quickly adds up to millions of dollars. You're bankrupt. You have to sell your house. You lose your mortgage. Americans are afraid that they can't afford to be sick, and there's something to right. And the folks who think they have health insurance, they think that right up until they get sick. Once you're sick, it turns out what you thought was insurance wasn't so good. Only in America.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I answered her question. It's
okay.
We had a user that had a question. I answered it.
Anybody else speak out? Stories? Yeah, please. Sure. Basically, it would be a government entity like Medicare is today. Let's remember, everyone loves to have the joke, about I don't want the government messing with my Medicare. Well, Medicare is the government. And by the way, it's much lower cost in terms of administrative overheads, and it's much more transparent and accountable than private insurance. People saying, oh, I'm afraid of big government, right? Well, your choice is the faceless bureaucrat who is from the for-profit health insurance company, the employee their salary depends, they're on a bonus system, so their salary depends on stamping a certain amount of denials every day, and they're accountable to the CEO, whose job it is to make sure that there is quarter-on-quarter growth in profits. Remember, they're not in the insurance business, they're in the making money business. Versus the way Medicare works ideally, the way it did work before Medicare Advantage came in and messed things up. It still works better than anything else. The way Medicare works, where you're paying in through your taxes, it's completely transparent. By law, all the data, all the information is available. The government bureaucrats on straight salary, they just get paid for following the protocols and doing the job. And they're accountable to electable politicians who can out of office. They're not accountable to Wall Street hedge funds. And they're not accountable to executives whose immediate short-term bonus pay each year is dependent on how they can fiddle the profit margin to the benefit of their stock options.
which is the way the current system works. So yes, it would be a government agency following rules and regulations, and much more transparent and much more affordable. So your choice is a government bureaucracy or a for-profit corporate bureaucracy. Somebody's got to administer it. And we know that the overhead for Medicare is around 3%, and the overhead for the for-profit insurance companies run around, depending on the company, between 15 and 25%.
Well, it doesn't mean that the people who work now for insurance companies couldn't be employed in that system. I mean, they
right. Obviously,
they wouldn't only
currently the agency that does Medicare and Medicaid is CMS. That's the name of it, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So it's an agency of the Federal Health and Human Services, like NIH and FDA and CDC. There's CMS that administers Medicare and co-administers with the state's Medicaid. So obviously they would be ramped up a lot. And there's various plans about how you would have some of it by the states or regions, so folks would have some more. I mean, there's different variations, different flavors of the way it could be done.
It couldn't be more complicated than what we have now.
Much simpler. I mean, single line. You pay the tax up, they pay the doctor or clinic down. 2 lines. Yes, so some of the folks would be taken on by CMS. You got a lot of these, let's say, nurses, right? Because they're hiring nurses because they're cheaper than doctors. They're hiring nurses into these insurance companies to do all the analysis of claims denial. So some of them could go back and do, nursing. Some of them could do healthcare instead. But yes, I mean, it is the case that there's a balance. It's good for the entire rest of the economy. It's good for every other business out there, with the partial exception of the pharmaceutical companies. But yes, you're absolutely right. The goal, frankly, is that the health insurance companies should be out of business, as they can insure other things, not health.
This is kind of a dystopian question.
Sure.
What happens if we keep doing what we're doing now? What do healthcare professionals see as, 20 years from now, 25?
I'm an optimist because I'm a pessimist. The reform we got, CPACA, ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, the reform we got, is spit and gum. It's going to fall apart. It's not going to control costs. It's not going to cover everybody. And so we're going to come to a fork in the road down the line. We're going to have, we got healthcare reform 0.7. We never did get 1.0, but we got 0.7. So the question is, what happens? I mean, okay, if I'm wrong and everything is peachy keen, great. Assuming it isn't, and I don't think it is for the reasons we talked about, what happens next? Well, what happens next is we go through the battle again. And the question is, where does the blame fall? There are going to be those on the right who are going to say, see, this is what happens when the government takes over healthcare. That's what they're going to say. It doesn't matter that it's false. Or there's going to be the folks who are going to say, look, this is what happens when you try to keep the for-profit insurance companies in business, when you prop them up with the individual mandate, using the police power of the state to force people to buy an inherently defective product. This is what happens when you basically, add another hump to the camel, as it were, instead of building scratch with a program we know works like Medicare and like the insurance systems in every other developed country in the world. So there's that fork in the road, right? Because what we got really was more for-profit insurance. I mean, what we got was take the existing system, try to put a few regulations here and there around it, but actually providing market subsidy, tax-paid subsidy to the for-profit insurance companies. Okay, so this whole thing about if you're below a certain poverty level under the new plan, you'll get some tax benefit to buy insurance. So that's taking taxpayer money to buy a more expensive for-profit private product. That's what that is. Okay, 50% of the increase of coverage under ACA is acknowledged to be a proposed increase in Medicaid. Well, we know what's happening with Medicaid, right? That doesn't kick in to 2014. Meanwhile, Medicaid's being cut. So already we're seeing the system beginning to fall apart. They were supposed to put in this thing about cost controls, but they're already giving waivers across the country saying that the medical loss ratio doesn't have to be 85%. Is that a wonderful phrase, medical loss ratio? You know what I mean? Medical loss ratio is called health care. Okay, the insurance companies, when they have to pay for health care, that's their profit, so they call it medical loss ratio. So one of the things was there was supposed to be a cap on how much the insurance companies could extract out of the system, 15%, 20%, okay, but it's being waived. So we fought for, well, those who fought for it, not already are losing it at the regulatory level, and it's waived. So the question is going to be, we're going to have to fight this battle again, sooner or later, probably sooner. And the question is which way does the working road go the next time? You know, we've been hearing actually from both moderates and even some conservatives, you know, that this better work or, you know, the next step's going to be single payer. Good. I'm okay with that. They're right. You know, we know, again, they've seen the same studies I have, that from the econometric modeling, the health systems modeling, we know that this is what would work. Right. The only block is the power of the health insurance company.
Well,
we know we have some interesting examples, though. You know, there is this movement for state-based single payer, where the pool would be a single state. It actually passed in California some years ago, but the governor Schwarzenegger terminated it. Turn of phrase. So it's a version, a weak version of single payer very light, if you will, passed in Vermont. Now, Vermont's a small state, it's relatively homogeneous, it has relatively less poverty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's assuming they get the waiver from the federal government to allow them to proceed, and assuming that it doesn't get further watered down, we hope it might be a model. Hawaii is looking at single payer, again, another small atypical state. It will come back on the agenda in California, I think once the economy is in a little bit better recovery. There's several other states that are pushing for it at various levels, including, by the way, Massachusetts, where it's back on the agenda because guess what? The better form of TPACA, Romney Care, same idea with mandates and subsidies, regulation, yada, 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 unable to control costs in the system. And while they've increased the percentage of people who have quote-unquote insurance, absolutely true, the quality of what that actual insurance is, in many cases, is worse, so that the deductibles are higher, the premiums are higher, the co-pays are higher, et cetera, et cetera. So, time will march on whether we want it to or not, so we shall see. But meanwhile, we're going to keep up the good fight. And we're going to keep getting the word out. We're going to keep organizing at the local and community level everywhere across the country. Physicians for National Health Program, by the way, despite the name, we're open to non-physicians as members. In New York, we're probably at least 50% non-physicians. Nationwide, there's another group called Healthcare Now, which is the national sort of non-physician group, if you will. So you can look at those. But in the case of PNHP, we have about 20,000 members across the country. We have chapters in almost every state. Within states, we have local folks in different parts of the state. I know New York the best, because that's where I'm from. But we, of course, have healthcare in North Carolina, your own North Carolina statewide coalition. And we're everywhere. We're in all the other states.
What about the social services? Are they by themselves, or they're getting united? Like, you know, for example,
absolutely. You know, I'm just here talking about healthcare, and you're 100% correct. The entire rest of the social safety net in the United States.
There was a guy from Vermont this morning.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The rest of the social safety net in the United States is much worse than it used to be, and it's much worse than any other of the developed, industrialized, capitalist countries that we consider kind of our peers. But
it's killing other people that
absolutely. I mean, this whole thing of privatizing inherently public functions, the outsourcing, the let's give taxpayer money, and instead of doing it ourselves as the government, let's give it to a private for-profit, that kind of outsourcing. It's bad when it's the military or CIA doing it with Blackwater. It's bad when it's Medicare doing it to well-point. And it's bad when it's absolutely. You know, the for-profit motive works really well for certain things. It works well for widgets. It works well for, you know, buying manufactured goods, you know, and do I get this TV or that TV? Do I get this car or that car? Right? It works really well for certain things. It doesn't work for other things. That's not a complicated concept. You know, for-profit works for certain things. It doesn't work for other things. Some things are inherently social community functions.
Anybody else over there says, oh, yeah, no problem, I got you. So, splitting the money with the patient, or?
Yeah, that, you know, that kind of fraud, it does occur. It's a very tiny piece of the issue. When you actually look at the numbers, it doesn't add up that much. And by the way, enforcement is better in progressive administrations than in conservative ones.
How do most of the doctors feel? I mean, I know how
Sure.
you feel, but...
Obviously. You know, could you tell?
No, I just wonder.
So, actually, we've done that. That survey has been done. Nationwide survey of physicians across all specialties, all states, all regions. The good news is 60% of physicians would support national health insurance, single payer. That's up about 10% over a 5-year period from when the last time the survey was done. I should point out that this is an academic, peer-reviewed research paper. In other words, the kind of stuff we're supposed to believe, so you know we think it's true. The bad news is it's very different by different specialties. So primary care folks, internal medicine, pediatrics, family medicine, OBGYN tend to be more in favor. The higher income, proceduring, subspecialists are less in favor. But there's something else that's interesting. Two things, actually. One is that if you survey doctors as to which insurance they like, and by the way, the AMA, which of course is a more conservative organization, and by the way, of which only 20 to 25% of physicians belong to. So the AMA would like you to think they represent American medicine, they don't. But the AMA does an annual survey of a whole bunch of things, including doctors' satisfaction with different insurance companies. Doctors prefer Medicare than any other insurance. They get less hassle from it. Medicare just pays. So they don't have to fight. Most doctors get that the bureaucratic overhead and issues of the billing services and the denials and the copay and the fighting with the insurance companies and having to fight with the patients and having that get in the way of the patient-doctor relationship isn't good for them either. So yeah, overall 60% of physicians in favor, and it's going up. Overall, doctors prefer Medicare to the private for-profit insurance companies. And let's remember, the healthcare system isn't for the doctors, it's for the people. And it turns out that when you do surveys of Americans, and I'm talking about, you know, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, CNN, Yahoo, the New York Times, mainstream, regular big media polls show that depending on how you word the question in the specific year, between 55 and 70% of Americans favor national health insurance too. Okay? So again, somewhere between a small majority and a big majority are in favor of this. First of all, think of comparison to Obamacare. Much simpler to explain, right? Medicare for all. Expanded and improved Medicare for all. You pay for it with your taxes. Everybody has it. You're automatically in. End of story. You know, it's not the complicated Camel Earl copy of complexity with charts going this way and that way of how it's going to work with the mandate with this pool and that pool and this subsidy and that one going over here, and WellPoint's over here, and Medicaid's over here, and Humana's over there. You know, that's crazy. So again, repeated public opinion polling shows that large majorities support this. Of course, large majorities support strengthening Medicare, strengthening Social Security. Large majorities, again, regular mainstream media polling say that we should be increasing the taxes on the wealthy. A large majority, by the way, including Republicans, large majority Republicans believe that we should not be having corporate sponsoring of our politicians. So the whole Citizens United and everything that existed before that in terms of corporate companies paying the politicians for the campaigns. About 80%, 75, 80% of Americans are opposed to that, and 70% of Republicans are opposed to it. Okay? So
why do they vote for
why
it?
aren't we getting it?
Right.
It's not the way they vote. Again,
I know.
Everybody thinks the other guy
you know,
wants it.
so, you know, that one surprised me. I mean, I was surprised when I saw that, but this is mainstream, big media, public opinion polling.
Because
you know,
they wanted to make these 4 years of Obama the worst years.
Yeah.
So they're doing everything that they can to make him look as bad as possible.
And then they'll come in
But
and
remember, first of all,
do what
you know,
he's trying to do.
the disaster struck, right? I mean, we saw the Republican Bush Enron company going belly up because of fraud during the Bush years. We saw that the Wall Street bubble bursting, the real estate bubble bursting, all the fraud with the multiple layers of financialization of everything blowing up. That, of course, was on a Republican watch. But I have to say that the deregulation, the drop in the taxes, and all of that, it goes way back. Actually, some of us like to sort of date it. If you want to stick a pin in the date book of when this all started getting worse, there's something called the Powell Memo, which is, I believe, from 1971. Justice Powell, before he was a Supreme Court justice, he was a corporate lawyer for, by the way, the tobacco companies, among others. This was 1971. This is when the Clean Air Act had been put into place. EPA had just been signed into law. It was really from a pure sort of class income base, the time when the least inequality in the United States had occurred. And he wrote a memo that basically said, look, we the rich and the corporate have to gang together and paint big government as bad, cut taxes, cut regulation, cut the power of the unions, and take back control and roll everything back to the Free New Deal. He wrote it all down. You can look it up. That's sort of when it takes off. And I got to tell you, the first huge cuts in taxes for the wealthy, especially the capital gains tax, but also the income tax, and the first cuts in deregulation, the failure of an attempt to get National Health Service through was under Carter. So a lot of stuff actually began, I'm afraid to say, under Carter. And from every administration, you want to get the health care for all North Carolina in here as part of your shot. You know, it's been, unfortunately, I think the way I put it is the Republicans are 100% bad, and the Democrats are 60% bad. I'm not one of those folks personally who's in favor of a third-party movement. I think we need a second party. We need a real second party. And I would encourage folks to take over the Democratic Party. It's the way to do it, myself.
Tried that.
But different folks.
Ain't gonna work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think third party's gonna work. Different folks have different opinions.
No, third party's not gonna work either. That's for sure. It's got to be no party.
Well, not sure how that's gonna work either.
It's not gonna happen. There's no mention of parties in the Constitution.
That's true too.
And there were no parties in the beginning. Neither Adams nor Jefferson were part of a political party.
Yeah, they were part of political groupings. Not entirely
They were groupings,
true.
but
Washington and Adams were in one block.
Like we have now.
Yeah, Washington and Adams were one block, and Jefferson and Madison were in another block. Yes, please.
I didn't know that only 20% of physicians were members of the
Might be 25. They don't have to give out the numbers, but
I heard it was like 16.
But here's what I want to know. Can you imagine, or has there been discussion of physicians boycotting certain panels in order to take patients from different insurance companies who have to apply to a physician panel?
Right.
So do physicians ever consider saying, we will not take Blue Cross Blue Shield anymore because they're almost a monopoly in North Carolina, and then all of their customers would...
I don't know the North Carolina situation well. Is that real Blue Cross Blue Shield, or is it the one that was bought out by somebody?
The one in North Carolina is almost
Are they still non-profit?
They're still non-profit, but they probably sell about 80+% of all the group policies in North Carolina.
So my real question is, are physicians to put your money where their mouth is and to experience it in the short term in order to make change in the long term.
Certainly some individual physicians are. I think there might be an issue, the problem is sort of those boycotts. Are they going to sue for...
They won't get sued. They just won't be able to see those patients.
Yeah.
And then those patients won't head anywhere in that 50-mile radius that the insurance company
Well,
guarantees.
see, then, you want to bind there because you don't want to decrease access for people who need health care. So...
The access is already decreased.
Right. But, in the short run, it would make things worse for those folks. And of course, what you have is you've got sort of concierge-type physicians who are already doing that in the sense that they don't take insurance. They're a physician. More of them perhaps in Manhattan than in some other parts of the country. Park Avenue, Bel Air, those kind of places, where they don't take insurance. Right. You're on your own. So you pay the doctor, they'll give you a bill, and then you can go ahead and file it yourself. That's very common, I'm afraid, in New York among private physicians. What you're saying... Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to defer local North Carolina stuff to North Carolina folks. For example, a lot of Blue Cross Blue Shield across the country, it had that name still, but they've been bought out by for-profit insurance companies. So in New York, it was called Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? It was one of the original Blue Cross Blue Shields. And this goes back, there's a whole wonderful history of how Blue Cross Blue Shield started. It was originally state-based and community-wide rating, right? It was brilliant. It was exactly the kind of, it was almost like having state single payer. And then what happened is private insurance came in, they skimmed off the healthy and wealthy so that Blue Cross Blue Shield couldn't afford to do community rating anymore, so then they started doing cost-based rating in smaller and smaller pools. And then later, the way the tax structure changed, in part during one of the Reagan tax reforms, they promoted the private buying up of the blues. So the fact that you're a nonprofit blue, even if it sort of acts as a for-profit,
well, it's only a nonprofit in name only. Don't take away
No, you can always tell if they're really a nonprofit based on how much the executives make.
They make billions.
Okay,
millions. Millions in North Carolina.
$400,000 ought to be enough for the CEO. The CEO shouldn't make more than most of the physicians. That's the physician talking, but what's the purpose here? The purpose is to deliver care. The physician is the one who actually has, if you will, the specialized skills that are being compensated for, versus the insurance executive who, quite frankly, is interchangeable. Wherever you want to draw the cut point, 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is for your CEO, it shouldn't be much more than what, say, the average physicians are being reimbursed. That's one way you can tell. The other question is, are they doing capital accumulation in order to do other kinds of things? If they're doing capital accumulation, that means they're not spending the money on care. So the for-profit, non-profit, the only difference is a public company selling shares on Wall Street. You can be non-profit from an IRS shares public corporation point of view, but act as a for-profit, and that may be what's going on. In New York, what the case is, Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield is a subsidiary of WellPoint. But one of the things people don't realize is that how many of the insurance companies that have like their little local name or some old familiar name like Blue Cross Blue Shield are just subsidiaries of 5 to 7 conglomerates. There's really basically 7 insurance companies in the country that have pretty much the whole market. So, I'm sorry, sir.
But, actually, he was
oh,
first.
I'm sorry.
Is that okay, Ron?
Back.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So 20%, less than 20% of physicians are members of the AMA.
Of the what?
Of the AMA.
And it could be as high as 25. It could be as low as 16.
Whatever.
Okay.
Now,
sure enough.
I imagine you are probably aware that there is another organization of physicians which is forming called Docs for Patient Care. And they are on Fox News.
Oh, gee.
Oh, my God. But they are.
Yeah, so they're a little bit of a cutout. I don't know what their membership is, but I don't think it's very big. What most doctors belong to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But my point.
Yes.
My point is, I know some of these guys.
Sure.
Okay?
Sorry.
No. I know some of these guys, and I've been to PNHP meetings. They crutch the same way you do. It's no different.
You say fetch down here in North Carolina?
Yeah.
I know we say it in New York.
No, we say fetch here too. They fetch as much as you do.
Norma Ray moment here.
And the reason is very simple.
Yep.
And the growth of physicians over the last couple of decades. So where's all that money going?
Going to the administrators.
Going to the administrators.
And the administrators are, for the most part, not entirely the insurance companies. I certainly hope that any of the docs who are feeling that way will eventually come around to the sort of underlying whys and what the underlying solutions might be.
But remember, these are people of self-interest.
Yeah.
And they are very worried about a national health care because they see it as a further devaluing of them.
Right.
That's
We see it as a freeing up of them in terms of the profession, in terms of professional autonomy, frankly, as well. I will not say, well, I will say that some of the higher end proprietary physicians, if you will, at the higher end, will take a cut. They'll still earn a great living. Okay, they will still be part of the upper middle class. You know, a cardiovascular surgeon, a neurosurgeon, or orthopedic surgeon is going to make more than a pediatrician, and that's appropriate. And it's also the way it is in other countries, all those other developed countries that I keep talking about. But what we've got now is just not sustainable. And going to more private insurance and more fragmentation is not sustainable. So we offer an alternative.
Have you ever heard of Epiphany Healthcare? Epiphany. It's located down in Florida. It's a bunch of guys who, they're family practice docs. They have copped out of the system. And they are doing concierge medicine. Essentially. $1,000, $1,200, whatever it is. They will see you anytime. They will also get the lowest price cost they can on tests, consultants, etc. Now, right now, those guys are not allies. I can tell you that.
Right.
They are like, you know, you're the devil.
Right. No, I understand. They are proprietary, entrepreneurial.
Well, they're entrepreneurial, but they are physicians. And what they don't like is they don't like the bureaucracy.
Sure.
They don't like
the
that.
question is,
That's
what
the
happens
thing
when you
like.
need surgery?
You're
What
right.
happens when you need chemotherapy? What happens when you're a diabetic who's now into renal failure and is having some foot problems? What happens? Fill in the blank. What happens if you can't afford the X amount? So that's a model that works for a small group of doctors serving a selected, skimmed off, healthy and wealthy selection of the population. And that's what we want.
We live in corporate socialism.
He doesn't even know what free market socialism is.
No.
But that's what it leads to.
Yeah.
You hang out windows and stuff.
No, I mean, it's sad because, you know, I'm guessing that those folks don't make more than $150,000 a year, and everything we're talking about is beneficial to folks somewhere between the 150 and 250 mark. And frankly, it's socially beneficial for everyone else. I mean, do you really want to live in a country that's going to gated communities and complete separation? Do we want to become Argentina and Brazil circa 1970?
Nope.
Can I get on stack? Can I get on stack?
I'm sorry, sir.
Well, yes, I might have missed some of the, so you might have addressed it, but if you discussed tort reform as a potential way to reduce healthcare costs.
Tort reform is raised by, frankly, the conservatives all the time is the big issue. There's one little problem. It's about 3% of the cost driver. So if there's some, at the margin, there's some arguments about it having a role. And by the way, it's a much simpler, like everything else, it's a much simpler, more rational system in other countries. In Canada, Germany, et cetera, the malpractice premiums are much less than they are in the United States. But frankly, it's a trivial issue that's meant to distract from the real issues.
So preventive medicine is 3%.
The combined cost of the preventive defensive medicine done as a matter of protection plus the actual torts is about 3%. Now, there's a lot of over medicine being done. There's a lot of over treatment being done. It's not done really as, I mean, this has been studied actually quite a bit. It's other than the Cato Institute and Heritage Foundation, it's not felt to be a lot of it on the defensive thing. It's sort of the socialization of how we do healthcare as physicians. You know, that we're taught to intervene, we're taught that medicine is the approach. You know, like what we see with tight control for diabetes, it turns out all the drugs don't really work, and it turns out that all the folks who are arguing physical activity and diet were right on for certain issues around diabetes compared towards tight control strictly through medication.
Cato's not concerned
So,
with it, but how much does anesthesiology make?
I'm not aware of how much the anesthesiologist, but again, it's much lower in other countries. It plays a role, but frankly, it's a marginal role, and it's raised by conservatives as a distraction point, and it's also part of the whole it's the general corporate deregulation. So the idea is that the corporations should be, it's basically free market only for the corporations, so they should be allowed you to sell defective products, they should be allowed to lie in the marketing, and then nobody should be allowed to sue them. So that's what corporate is about. I mean, when you really get down to it.
So there's not jury shopping?
Yeah, I mean, tort reform is actually, if you look at the details of single payer, there is tort reform in single payer too, in terms of how it's paid for, who it's paid for, and so forth. But in all honesty, any of the serious policy wonks, and by the way, even some of the Republican policy wonks, the slightly more honest ones, blocking on his name, the guy who was the Medicare, the first Medicare director in CMS under Bush.
No, the Texas guy from Texas.
Yeah,
McCormick or something.
Yeah, the brother of the press secretary. Okay, so Republican health policy guy. McClellan. Thank you. He acknowledges that tort reform is a trivial piece of it. Now that he's, you know, so you know these guys once they're not running to be, you know, tied to a candidate or something, and they start looking at the numbers honestly. There's a problem around malpractice premiums. There's a problem around defensive medicine. It's trivial and it's a margin compared to other stuff. So there is issues of overtreatment. I personally think that the issue of under access to care is worse than the overtreatment issue. But you know, the Dartmouth Atlas people and all the studies, you know, showing that certain populations of physicians, you know, the same patients are more likely to do a cabbage or more likely to do this procedure or that procedure or this drug or that drug, and there's over-treatment in certain groups compared to other groups. It depends on local physician culture, if you will, but also based on certain incentives in terms of, if they own the x-ray machine, more x-rays tend to get done and billed for. Plus, of course, the drug companies with their aggressive marketing. And, remember when we used to call them the ethical drug companies? It was this period of term. I'm just old enough to remember when we called them the ethical drug companies.
Ethical pharmaceutical.
Right, because they were the ones that didn't do the direct-to-consumer advertising. That was the distinction, and that went away. So the drug companies are heavily marketing drugs that are of questionable efficacy for questionable reasons. And the psychiatrists and the cardiologists are probably the two specialties that have been most corrupted by this. And it's not to say some medicines don't work, and some medicines do work, and some medicines work a little bit. But, frankly, the drug companies have been the biggest pushers and dealers in some unethical ways. Sure, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have to leave in about 5 minutes.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So, quick question, and then Beth had a question.
The Canadian government is able to, from my understanding, is able to get significant discounts from Big Pharma in this country.
Right.
Why can't the major insurance companies here do that?
Well, for one thing, they're fragmented. So, and for another thing, it's their own corporate buddies. So it's part of the same ideology, and frankly, it's part of the same interlocking. If you look at the boards of directors, if you look at the hedge funds that actually own them, it's sort of the same relatively small number of funds. But it's not just Canada. It's every other developed country in the world. I mean, in New Zealand, actually, Canada is about half the cost. New Zealand is actually about a third the cost. And remember, these drug companies are all multinational companies. It's the same companies all over the world with the same drugs all over the world. The research, the basic science research is paid for with public funds, NIH grants, as well as the equivalent in other countries. They're only spending 13% in R&D. I'm sorry, the drug companies only spend 13% on R&D, despite their claims. The real primary research is tax paid for with NIH. I mean, that's what the basic science is. Also, the drug companies are all multinational companies. It's the same drugs, whether it's Canada, New Zealand, the UK, Germany, France. Everybody else pays less than we do, because by law, we're not allowed to negotiate the price down.
So can we just have Becca's quick question, and then if he needs to leave, is that okay? Okay.
So my question is that we understand that the way it works now is not working, but is this something that you're actually doing? Is there a plan to get this started? What's the solution to all this that you've been talking about? Because all I've heard is what the problem is, but I haven't heard any talk about
we have
what's going
on. Legislation that's been, written. Does it have any chance of passage tomorrow? No. Will it pass eventually? I think it will. So we need to keep fighting for it. HR 676, the House bill for single payer. That's HR 676, is the House bill. There's a Senate bill that's sort of the semi-companion. It's a little bit more state emphasis, a little less national emphasis. I don't remember the Senate one off the top of my head. So there is legislation sitting in Congress. You can urge your senator and congressman to sign on as co-sponsors for it. You can keep talking it up. You can keep saying, look, tell everyone you meet, tell your Congress critters, your local council person, your state council person, everyone you meet, that the system is broken and that the problem with the health care reform we got is that it didn't go far enough, right? Because that's the question, right? Did it go too far, or socialized medicine, which it didn't at all, or did it not go far enough? And the answer is it didn't go far enough.
What's the title?
So HR 676, that's House Resolution, I think.
Is that just for North Carolina?
No, that's the national.
National.
That's the national one.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a state bill or not. We have one in New York State that's not going anywhere currently, but it does come up every year. It did pass the lower house in New York State some years ago. Never got through the Senate, the state Senate. But you can join your local healthcare single-payer group. In your case, North Carolina, the Healthcare for All North Carolina Coalition. And you can keep talking it up. Like I said, to me, it really isn't even a liberal or conservative issue anymore. It's just good policy. And we need to get away from, on this particular one, it's just such good policy and better, as you were hearing, for small business and big business and everybody except the insurance companies. It's not that bad for the pharmaceutical companies. They managed to make a profit in Germany and Canada and France and New Zealand. So the pharmaceutical companies will do okay regardless. And it's good for everyone else. So stay active, stay on message, let folks know what you really want at every opportunity. And my personal belief is take over your local Democratic club. If they want to get elected and stay elected, then they got to stay progressive. And if they don't, they'll be turned out of office. Essentially, if you will, the parallel to what the extreme right has done to the Republican Party. Hold their feet to the fire. And the fact is that the large majority of Americans, when you ask them, are actually in favor of all these things. They're in favor of higher taxes on the wealthy. They're in favor of higher wages and raising the minimum wage. They're in favor of protecting Social Security and Medicare. We're talking majorities of 60 to 80% on all of these, according to mainstream polling. So if we had real democracy in the United States, we'd be moving in this direction.
I just wanted to sort of summarize a little bit, and then we can So Steve is here actually for the statewide meeting of Healthcare for All NC. This is Dr. Jonathan Koch, who is a professor at UNC and is president of this local affiliate of Physicians for a National Health Plan. So Steve will be in Greensboro tomorrow at Moses Cone, right, for the statewide meeting. Is that open to
anybody?
It's open to the public from 1 to 3. From 1 to 3 at Moses Cone.
Family Medicine Center.
At the Family Medicine Center, Moses Cone. So anyone who's watching on the internet who happens to be in Greensboro. Dr. Auerbach would also be tomorrow in Durham at Occupy Durham in the Snow Building on West Main Street, 331 West Main Street. He'll be talking again from about 10 to 11 a.m. You know, I'm on the event on OccupyChapelhill.org. I plan to post a list of the books that he had brought last time, as well as his PowerPoint presentation, not last time, early today, as well as his PowerPoint presentation. And I hope to organize actually another event for strategy sessions, maybe bringing Jonathan Koch in here so we can talk about what we can do here locally. So this is just the beginning, and we need to take advantage of the fact that Steve is coming to town, but this isn't the end, and I'm open to continuing to dialogue around this. So I'd like to thank everyone so much for coming, and thanks especially for Dr. Steve Auerbach.
Occupy!
Yeah, thank you for coming to Occupy.
It's really not healthcare for the 99%. We want to make it healthcare for all. The 99% plus one.
Thank you, everybody, very much.